When we look at Greek mythology, it holds more than just the narrative. Demigods are the offspring of a god and a human female, or a goddess and a human male.
So Genesis 6.
Yes, so Nimrod became a mighty one. We have him climbing the ziggurat and threatening God, saying, if you get out of line again and try and bring the flood again, I'm going to go into heaven and I'm going to kill you.
Do you believe that Adam and Eve were the first of mankind?
We actually get people created on day 6. Now, is that the same creation as Adam and Eve? And the likely answer to that is only if you believe the Bible contradicts itself. Why would you have 7 holy mountains? Probably because you have 7 Satans in the book of Enoch. Reich is 1,000-year reign. He is trying to create a millennium, a counterfeit millennium, just as Antichrist will promise that as his new age.
They were trying to gene edit to backdoor into reverse engineering and changing the bloodlines through pharmacology.
There is going to be something with pharmaceuticals to seduce us to accept what they're going to tell us. There's different types of psychedelics for different types of beings. One of the things in polytheism is that they want to have communication with the spirit realm, the celestial mafia.
All of these Antichrist figures, do they fit inside of a Nephilim bloodline?
One of the things I would tell Christians is that when you decide to follow God, you can't imagine some of the places he's going to take you and have you do that you don't want to do. But when you do, there's large rewards for that.
Hey, before we get into this, we have one of our favorites. Gary Wayne is back in town. And if you haven't watched any of the other Gary Wayne episodes, then you're in for a treat. If you have, you're also in for a treat. We go down some incredible, I don't know what else to say, rabbit holes, but they're also very informative, interesting. We talk about Greek mythology. We talk about some of the clues hidden through history, ancient history, prehistory. But we sort of do something weird on this episode. And we land the plane at the end, and then we decide we don't want to land the plane. So we sort of undo it. It's kind of funny, but Gary gives us a beautiful ending, and we're like, wow, that was amazing. Let's stop here. And then we're like, wow, let's not stop here. Let's keep going. So you'll see there's like a part 1 and there's a part 2. We just decided to put these in one episode. So hang with us. This is a long episode, and I think you'll be impacted by it and made better by it. But just give us some slack. Cut us some slack, because this is the first time we've done a 2-part episode in one episode. So without further ado, we'll see you inside. Everyone wants to get to the high places, but if you want to go high, you first have to go deep. What's up? Welcome back to the Deep End. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, man.
Dude, we are about to cook. Okay? We're about to cook. We have one of our favorite people in the world back in town with us, Mr. Gary Wayne from Canada. I'm glad they let you into the country this time.
Dear God, dude.
We pray for you every time you're flying here, because we know that it's tense at the border, but they let you through.
They did. I don't know why they did.
You just are trustworthy.
Yeah, apparently I put on a nice smile, and they said, this guy can't be who they say he is.
What was your reason for coming in the country? What did you tell them? Did you tell them you were going on a podcast?
Just business.
Okay.
Just business.
And
that's all we are to you?
Well, with customs officers, you only answer the question as simply and quickly as possible, because they have so much power that if they don't like the answer, and I almost had it at one time when I was in business and I was on a way to a meeting that was called to go into Dallas. And they asked, why Dallas? I said, well, that's the place where they decided they wanted to have it. And they said, if you say a remark like that again, you will never be crossing the border again.
What?
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, wow.
So you want to be, they have a lot of power. And even if they just put something on your file, that's going to cause you grief every time you cross the border. So, it's yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. 3 bags full, sir. And be respectful, be nice. And even when you don't think that you might be being a smart aleck, you don't know what they're thinking. So you want to be careful. So glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm hoping I get back across the border.
You'll be fine. You'll be fine. We're going to get into your intro in a second, but the only time I've had a border issue was going to Canada.
Yeah.
I was flying to Calgary, then we were going to Banff to ski. And something I said made them think that I was selling phones or something, which I didn't say anything about selling phones. And they they detained me for like 2 hours to ask me questions about why I was bringing phones. And I was like, I was young, so I probably was rude. That's probably what happens.
Well, whatever you said, they misunderstood. And likewise, going across, if you're saying that you're going to sell something, and you better not take any merchandise to sell across the border, that even takes it up another notch.
Especially now.
Yeah, and
it's tariffs.
And that was and what I'm talking about, what you're talking about, was the age of free trade, which isn't totally true because of those types of restrictions. But there are other places in the world that you can go to where you're going to have a lot more concerns, like going into Russia, even to this day, or at times going into China. You can be put into a situation you never thought you could be put into.
Oh, well, okay. We'll stay away from that for now.
All right. Guys, well, welcome to the United States, Gary Wayne.
You're way welcome.
Let me give people a little bit of an indication of who Gary is. Gary is a Christian contrarian. We defined that a couple episodes ago, and he's the author of The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants. What's the end of this title?
How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind.
That was a test. I'm glad that you passed. You know your own book. And then The Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 2. Dude. Both of these books are crazy, and if you are like me and you're a student of history, these are some of my favorite books ever. They're thick. You put a lot of your life into writing these. You have studied pretty much everything, all of the religious texts, the different sects of religions, and you are renowned quite literally for your knowledge of biblical history, biblical prophecy, mythology, secret societies. And so what we're planning on unpacking today is a little bit of all of that. We're going to talk about some Greek mythology, maybe some World War II history, maybe some biblical prophecy. If this is your first time seeing Gary Wayne, plan in advance to pause multiple times so that you can process what he's saying. The last time we recorded with Gary, I was sick. It was the most terrifying moment of my life. Trying to process what he was saying while being sick was not a pleasant experience. But I'm happy today because we get to dive into your brain and the nuances of your brain. So thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and so glad to be back, and so happy to learn with the conversations before doing this show that the audience has received some of the shows that we've done rather well, and like some of the information that we provide, and hopefully we can do a little bit more on that and maybe connect some more dots that they hadn't thought about before.
Let's go. You want to kick it off? Take it away with what some of the you were talking about it before the show.
Okay, so on the topic of Greek mythology that Taylor brought up, a couple weeks ago, my wife and I, we went on a little vacation, and we went and saw the Greek Parthenon that's in Nashville, which we've talked about on the show a little bit before. But we went in, and I don't know, I just kind of forgot about mythology as a thing. We never really think about it, but you go to the Parthenon, and I'm not a total history geek, but it's fascinating to me how big of a deal gods were to the Greeks and how big the idols were, what you could call, I guess, the lore that went with it. And so I was standing there just kind of like, well, you had the gods of Baal. You have in the Old Testament, there's gods everywhere that people worship. And so my question to my wife, Heather, was like, well, I wonder what parts of this are true. And she was like, well, Gary Wayne's coming to town. And I was like, dude, here's what I want to know. I want to know with Greek mythology. I can't, this is why Taylor needs to do the interviewing. But my biggest question that I would love to answer with this show is like, what parts of Greek mythology are real? What parts are just completely maybe made up, or because it seems like they're different culture to culture, because some of the experts there were saying in one culture, Greek mythology looks like this, and in another culture, it's like this, and these gods did this. So I'm like, there is truth somewhere. And that's part of the hardest parts of the show, is how do we get down to the truth of what's real?
Yeah, it's such a good question, because you can take that to not almost all of the ancient cultures, that we have an oral tradition that starts in prehistory, and then it slowly starts to transition to some written history. And so prehistory is mostly an oral tradition, and so it's done in a way that's done in an interesting sort of narrative or a story. And so Herodotus in Greek mythology is kind of known as the first, let's say, legitimate historian where he's trying to separate the difference between fable and fact. And that's what he starts to do. And then as it sort of comes downstream, and because what they would do is, as I say, they would put the history encoded into the story.
As a way to translate the facts.
Yeah, and so that it would be remembered, right? And so there's another fellow by the name of Humor who is known for creating humorism. And what that is about is sifting through the myth to collect out the actual history that's held within that story. So what they're talking about is the Greek classics, right? And all of the information that's embedded in there, that there is a significant amount of fact and history woven into a story to keep people's interest and people would remember it before it was written down. And that's part of Greek hermeneutics, which is unfortunately part of Christian prophecy to a certain degree, because it's a polytheist concept. To understand the allegory purposely woven into these stories, and you need to be an adept to understand these things. And it actually goes back to, etymologically wise, back to Hermes, right? So it's not a good Christian understanding. I'll talk a little bit more about that when we do the prophecy series that we're going to be working with you. But understand that this is a methodology to keep the history, then take it out so that people know what is actually real. So when we look at Greek mythology, it holds more than just the narrative. So there's a lot of interesting things that are in there around major events, major characters, major locations. Those are going to be accurate. So how would you compare that to what we're talking about in a modern style? You might want to look at it with what the Inklings did, whether it's MacDonald or whether it is Tolkien or it's Lewis. They call it mythopoetic. It's a little bit different, but it's kind of an evolution where they write a very interesting story with all of the religion, with all of the main characters, main events, and locations written into it. And that it's what they call the fairy tale concept, that you have to understand the meanings of the names, locations, characters, and other important things that they're putting in there. So that's the art of what they were drawing out. So when we look at the Greek gods that you were referencing to, we have gods in all cultures around the world in polytheism. These are the same gods. And so they just have different vernacular names. So when you're mentioning Zeus, for example, you would go to Egypt, and Zeus is a post-diluvian offspring god.
That means that's
after the flood,
yep.
Who rules after the parent god, Kronos, as the chief male god. And those are two concepts people need to understand when we're looking at prehistory and mythology, is that Ra, or Atom ruled before the flood in Egypt. Osiris rules after. Kronos before, Zeus after. The Canaanite pantheon that you mentioned, to lead off the question with, El is the parent god before the flood. Baal is the god after the flood. Baal is equal to Zeus. El is equal to Kronos. You go over to the Sumerian pantheon, you have Anu, which is the same as Kronos, El, Ra, and then you have Enki, Baal, Adonis, Zeus, Osiris, and just go around the world like that. So if you go over to the Quiché Maya, for example, with the Popol Vuh, you're going to have Quetzalcoatl, an offspring god after the flood, equivalent to Osiris, who's one of the seven sages. But just to get people an understanding is you can now start doing some dating based on who's the gods. But you have to be a little bit careful, because as the offspring gods, they inherit not only the position, but the mythos of the god that they replaced. So it becomes almost wedded into it. So an example of that is you have Poseidon as the god of the sea, which is part of the offspring gods in Greek mythology, who rules over Atlantis, right? And creates the 10 demigod kings for the world empire that he's trying to bring about. And so Poseidon, though, isn't really the god that does that, although we get Cleito as the female that creates Atlas and all the other 10 giant kings that go along with that empire to rule over it. Poseidon isn't the ruler before the flood. He's there before the flood, just like Zeus is, but they don't take over till in mythology they say they overthrew the gods and they killed them. Well, you can't kill a being that's immortal. God might be able to, and does in the end time, with the lake of fire, but they're not dead. They're like dead because they're in the pit prison. And that's how they move up. And so when they disappear after the flood, they're said to be killed, like Baal in the Ugaritic text. He dies. Well, he can't die. Where is he? Well, he did the same crimes as the parent gods before the flood. They're in the pit prison as well. Sometime probably shortly after Babel, do those offspring gods who take over get sent to the pit prison for the same crimes. And then you have other angels that move up, fallen angels, to rule over the council of the gods. So understanding that Zeus is a real individual, just known by a different name all around the world, starts to make some sense. And that's why you get a flood in all of the stories around the world, including Atlantis. That's why you get giants recorded all around the world. You get little people all around the world. You get pyramids showing up all around the world, dating back to the same age, and ancient cities, and on and on and on. Things that you cannot arrive at through mathematical probability as happening, and that secular history does not account for. And if you talk to somebody in Greece about their mythology and say it's mythology and don't expand on that, they're going to be offended.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Now, what's the counterpart to that in North America? The First Nations. They have an oral history, not a written history. It's done in the same way, and they have giants and little people and the flood and everything else, just like all cultures around the world, with the same 4-class system in place, including a bloodline for the priests and the chiefs. And if you tell them that their history is fiction or myth, they'll be offended. They look at it as their history, but those who are running the civilization, the tribe, the nation, they will be able to understand what is story and what is fact. So we want to be able to try and glean out of that what is fact. And we get that because we get those same data points done in the same way all around the world, whether it's in the myth part or in the religious texts.
Got it. Okay. I have a few questions to pick up after this. Some of these might be dead ends, but I'm just going to shoot my shot and go for it. The first question is, because you have all of these different cultures with the same stories, I think it's modern interpretation that everything existed in like the Middle East. Mm-hmm. How did we go from there to like a North American or like an American story, and then you have the Eastern mythology? Mm-hmm. Were there multiple peoples this entire time, or was there a disbursement that happened?
Biblically, we don't get that there's just one continent. You get a passage in the time of Babel that maybe you could interpret some of the language in there. That's when the continents divided. Whether that, from what the polytheists would record as Middle Earth, for example, in the Lord of the Rings, right? Mm-hmm. As one island continent, and something happened to cause that. Maybe that's the flood. Maybe it happened, the splitting of the continents way in the past. Or maybe it was like that in the time of Adam. I mean, we're not specifically told that. So we want to be a little bit careful with that, because as we understand the land that Adam is ruling over, that's from the Euphrates to the Nile River, from Mount Hermon to the Red Sea. It's a large piece, right? But that doesn't mean it's all one continent. I mean, it's adjoined, even to this day, it's still adjoined to basically Africa and Asia and Asia Minor. So there could be other continents, and there certainly are other civilizations. So when Cain leaves when Cain leaves Adam and Eve, after Adam and Eve are ostracized from Eden, he goes east to the Euphrates River into Nod, a named place, which is
city, kind
of an out of part fact, unless you understand that there's already more other civilizations and other peoples that I don't want to go down that rabbit trail, because it's like a show in itself, the difference between day 6 and the Eden account, and we've probably covered that on past shows. But we associate the Adamites with the Sumerians or the Blackheads and one culture. But that doesn't mean there weren't other cultures. We just aren't told that they're there. And I'm not saying we should look at it as fact that there was other civilizations, but there may have been. And we want to be aware of that. So in polytheism, there is more than one culture. And depending on the history that you're looking at and who you're reading, you can go from 4 civilizations to 7 civilizations to 9 civilizations to 11 civilizations. So it's not exactly consistent in polytheism in the versions, but when you have the 9 continents or the 9 civilizations that you see in a lot of the modern sort of mythopoetic entertainment on TV, like the House of Dragon, for example, or not the House of Dragon, but the Game of Thrones, where the House of Dragon is basically what's being talked about there. You start to understand where that comes from. The constant would be probably more than 4 than just the 4 races that we would sort of distinguish today, or what the Popol Vuh and other religions would identify as the 4 peoples before the flood. 7 seems to be the most constant number of civilizations, and associated with 7 holy mountains in polytheism, just as we have those 7 mountains associated in the book of Enoch, which again, not scripture, but at least they start to get a little bit of a data point that maybe there might be more going on. Why would you have 7 holy mountains? Probably because you have 7 Satans in the book of Enoch. You have the 7 wandering stars around the world. So now you start to see that maybe there's 7 locations where you have 7 holy mountains and 1 central location for the council of the gods. So I think we should be open to the fact that there are multiple civilizations around the world that were significantly advanced that we're just catching up to today.
It seems like Tolkien thought there were 9.
Yeah.
Because he had 7 for the dwarves and 9 for the realms of men.
Yeah.
Okay, but how does that happen? Do you believe that Adam and Eve were the first of mankind?
No, I think
like, were these other civilizations human?
Yeah, I do. I think when we look at Adam and Eve, that is accepted as doctrine, that's the creation of the first humans. Well, it doesn't really say that. We actually get people created on day 6. Now, is that the same creation as Adam and Eve as with day 6? And the likely answer to that is only if you believe the Bible contradicts itself. And I do not. And the reason why I say that is when you line up the details in Genesis 2 versus Genesis 1, they don't coincide together. So what happens is as a quick example, is you have male and female created in multiple and in great numbers on day 6, told to multiply and to move around the world and settle the world as nomads. I would say hunters and gatherers. With the description of the food, they start off as gatherers. I think they become hunters as well with the corruption by the fallen angels, which becomes so corrupt that you need a creation of Adam and Eve. But Adam is created in singular. Eve is created sometime later from the rib. And you might say, well, that's just an additional detail, which the Bible does do quite often, gives you part of the information and adds. But this is different. It's not at the same time. And it's unique in that you have the Spirit breathed into Adam, but not included in day 6. And that's just the start. And at the start of the Adam and Eve story, you have Jehovah of the Elohim introduced, where he's not formally introduced in Genesis 1. That's Lord God, as it's translated in the KJV. And you have the Ruach of the Elohim hovering over the chaos in Genesis 1:2. You have Elohim as when God commands as Elohim in the singular there, but you don't have Jesus. And I'm not saying Jesus isn't there. I'm just saying he's not formally introduced. But there's a difference here. Something is being specifically inserted with the involvement of Jehovah of the Elohim. So Jesus clears things up to a certain degree, so I don't leave people dangling on that. Is that in John 1 and 8, he says, he is the Word of God, right? He is the word logos of the God theos. That's the cognate Greek version of Jehovah of the Elohim. Okay? Word logos, God theos in the New Testament. And he's also the light that the darkness didn't recognize in the beginning. And where does the light show up? It shows up before light with the sun and the moon. It shows up in Genesis 1:3 after the Ruach of the Elohim is introduced, and he's the light. That the darkness, the fallen angels, the destruction of what is that chaos there, don't recognize who he is. And yet he's there, and he is part of the creation, because in John 1 and in Colossians 1, Jesus creates everything. So the contradiction comes out when you go Elohim Amar. That is God in the singular in this case, in the superlative singular, and Amar is the Hebrew word said, or to speak. He's the word. God commands, the Word creates. That's how the Word creates everything. So something's new, something's really different. There's going to be this interaction with the Adamites that's not there with the people of day 6, just as it will be on the other side of the flood, where Jehovah of the Elohim is going to be the major one. Not that the Elohim doesn't, El Elyon, as we would understand him, or just straight El, or Abba, as Jesus calls him in the New Testament for Father. It's Jehovah who is there intimately almost all the time, all the way through, from Abraham through Israel, right? He's doing something special that he started with the creation and his introduction in 2:4. So now you get a different order of creation in day 2 than you do in day 1. If that was not day 2, if they're in Genesis 2 versus Genesis 1. And you have other details that just don't sort of, coincide. So I won't litigate the whole thing, but to give people an idea. I have a document for people on the differences one of my most popular documents I send out, where it walks through all of the differences. And then that starts to explain where the people came from and not, where Cain finds a wife that should not be there. And people say, well, it's a sibling. Well, it can't be a sibling because, as in a sister, because Seth is born when Adam is 130 years old. And then sometime later, you have other sons and daughters born but not named. Doesn't fit the chronology in terms of what happens in Genesis 2 and Genesis 3. And we don't know how long after day 7 when the Eden account is there, and you get the Toledoth that's going on, the Toledoth of the earth, Toledoth is genealogy. And we get that Toledoth or genealogy of Adam that shows up at the end of Genesis 4 and the beginning of Genesis 5. Same sort of language there, but an earth doesn't have a genealogy. This is a genealogy of the Adamites created for a special commission, because I think the whole earth had become corrupted by the fallen angels, including all of the people of the day 6. Do we have an example of that? Yes, we have an unexplained being that shows up in Genesis 3 called the serpent. The serpent is a beast of the field. The beasts of the field are created in day 6 before Adam, or before the humans that are called Adam as well. Adam takes the name of humans. He's the same species, might be a different race, but of the same species. So in 2 Peter 3, where we get a template for prehistory of this period, you have a day is 1,000 years. So if a day is 1,000 years and you have the beings of the field that are created before male and female, you could have up to 1,000 years difference. People might say, well, sun and the moon, 24 hours, that comes in about day 3 to 4. I think day 4, as I recall, doesn't explain the light that was there in Genesis 1:3, and you have creation going on before that. So when does the 24-hour cycle start? Well, the MO of the Bible is it stays consistent with the language and how things roll out. So yes, we have the firmament created with the sun and the moon, so that now we're going to have day and night. But that 1,000 years would roll through the whole 6 days of creation, as Exodus 20 talks about. It needs to be consistent, right, in terms of how that plays out. So you could have 7,000 years happening before Adam shows up, and maybe even longer, because we're not given a day 8. And this serpent people, Nahash, as it's in Hebrew, has a source word Nahash, which means not just a serpent, but it means a necromancer. It means a sorcerer. It means words that are associated with polytheist priests and priestesses. This is the one deceiving Adam. This is the one that's held up by polytheists to be the superior kingly race before Adam is created. That was taller than Adam and the size of a camel in terms of the height, as the Gnostics would describe the serpent. It's not Satan that's deceiving Eve, like most people think. In Ezekiel 28, Satan is said to be in Eden, but he's not seraphim there. He's not a serpent. He's the anointed cherub, a cherubim that is in Eden at that time. So he's there. He's just as Ezekiel 31 has him in there as the Assyrian or the great tree. But he's not in a serpent format. So he's probably the avatar of the Avatara Nahash, or he's coaching him. He's involved, but he's not doing the deception. And it's the Nahash being that gets punished, right? So we've got a lot more going on. And that example of this serpent being a priest of polytheism now suggests that the fallen angels had set up their religion before Adam.
Oh.
And corrupted the earth, which may cause a restart again.
So mankind was created first and Adam was created after.
Yes.
As an individual.
Yeah. And Adam is placed in the garden as an agrarian, not a nomad, not a gatherer, or not a hunter and a gatherer. He is going to be raising, and particularly as you take it back to the Greek or to the Hebrew meanings of the words, he is managing a plantation, an agricultural plantation from the Nile to the Euphrates. They are raising domestic animals. They are planting crops, and there are orchards, and there's one of them. And then God relents and gives them one helper. It's still this massive place. But the point of the matter is, he's not a nomad. It's in contradiction to day 6. So the only way you get through that and how things start to make sense rolling forward, with all the details that I've provided, and there's more in the document that I can send people, is that there's 2 different creations of the humans. And we're seeing this cycle of fallen angels that continue to try and destroy humankind of all forms by leading them away from God and then destroyed into oblivion. That's their goal.
Okay. Are you good so far?
Yeah.
You look a little...
I'm trying to keep up the best I can woozy right now, bro. You seem like you're keeping up, so if I can follow you, I can follow Gary.
Great. Let me tie in. So mankind is created as a species.
Yeah.
Is Adam created sometime after day 7?
Yes.
Why do we think God created Adam if you already had... I'm assuming God's the one that created the species.
Yeah, God, the Word, when God said the Word. When God created day 6, understand he's Alpha and Omega. So he understands the beginning from the end. He knows everything that's going to play out and how it's going to play out from the beginning, which is why he's able to write all the names in the book of life, in that book of life, from before creation, so that everybody will have an opportunity to leave their name in or have it blotted out. So he knows everything that's going to happen. But he lets that free choice that he provides not only to humans, but to angels to play out and to fully indict themselves. And that's what the fallen angels do. The Nephilim, they fully indict themselves with the crimes they're going to commit after their rebellion against humankind. So what do? If this day 6 scenario, as I'm setting forth, is accurate, is they are going to corrupt all of the day 6 people and lead them away from God and justify their rebellion. That's what they're looking for, a legal play, in my opinion, to create some sort of truce, treaty. We can have the earth rule on our own and away from God. But God knows this is going to happen, lets them indict themselves, and restarts.
With Adam.
With Adam.
Okay.
And it's an MO that continues to play out. It restarts again after the flood. It restarts again after Babel.
Yep. Okay. You mentioned Hermes earlier. So it seems to have a hierarchy. So you have the parent gods, the offspring gods, and then the demigods underneath that, correct? Which demigods would be half god, half human?
Yes. So
like Nephilim?
Just a quick clarification on that. So the offspring gods would have been lower in rank when the parent gods ruled. They move up because they're all part of the Saba, Hebrew Saba for host of heaven, means an army of angels, rank and order. Mm-hmm. So they are not offspring of the gods as the allegory comes down. It's just that's used to create the story. And so they can't create their own angels. They can create demigods, but they can't create their own angels.
Got it.
And so demigods are the offspring, it's understood in the ancient definition as the offspring of a god and a human female, or a goddess and a human male.
So Genesis 6.
Yes, so Genesis 6. Demigods are giants.
Would Hercules fit the bill for this?
Yes, he is son of Zeus and Alcmene after the flood.
Zeus being equal to Baal?
Zeus being equal to Baal, who creates Rephaim after the flood.
Rephaim is a Nephilim after the flood?
Rephaim is a tribe of giants, and a generic name for giants, and derived from one of the many names of Baal. He has several names. Baal also means Lord God, which is why it's taken in by the secret societies, or husband God, you could also define it as. But Baal also creates, and the Baalim Council create other giants as well. So when we look at the demigods that are talked about in the Ugaritic text, they're members of the assembly of the Detanu. And what's interesting, I'll take it back to Greek now.
Okay.
The Detanu are the giant tribes. And there are other nations of giants as well, like GBR is a tribe in the Ugaritic text that Gibborim derives from in Semitic, and others. I won't go through all of them, but there's lots of tribes there. In Middle Eastern languages, there's a similarity from the original founding, even with the confusion of the languages. And the D and the T is has a different sound in multiple languages. So the god Aten would be in Hebrew Adon. Instead of T, it's a D. And that can be used in multiple different ways as it comes out. So when we say the word Datan or Detanu for the assembly, that's Hebrew in the Bible, Dadan. Okay? Same word. And Hebrew comes out of Semitic. Now, how that's transliterated into Greek is it's not with two Ds, but with two Ts, where Detanu has a D and a T, right? So now you get Titan. There are titans of heaven, and there are titans of the earth. Fallen angels, the demigods.
Got it. Hermes. Wasn't Hermes an Egyptian god that was like a record keeper? Or are there multiple?
Yeah, Hermes is more demigod than God. He becomes a god through his knowledge. So he'd be understood in Greek as not only as Hermes, but as Mercury as well.
Okay.
It's the same god. And in Egypt, he'd also be understood as Thoth, the god Thoth, the god of wisdom.
Right. Okay. Thoth.
I've heard of people channeling that god actually specifically. That's interesting.
Well, yeah. And again, if we look at things that happen in modern times, the book of 3rd Enoch says that Enoch, son of Cain, had his name changed to Metatron when he became an angel. He was raised to godlike status from a polytheist. And this is a polytheist doctrine, 3rd Enoch.
Not to be confused with 1 Enoch.
Yeah.
Which is different, correct?
Which would be, so 2 Enochs in the Bible. Enoch, son of Cain, Enoch, son of Jared, one of the Seth line, one of the Cainite line. They both write scripture. They're both important patriarchs, and they get conflated a lot of times. And so Metatron is the one that is communicating much of the knowledge as to what people are writing algorithms and working on AI and high technology, who they receive that knowledge from.
Yikes.
Metatron is the root for the metaverse.
Oh. Okay, well I have to make a decision now to go down that trail.
Sorry about that.
Okay, I'm going to write that down and we're going to come back to it.
Oh my god.
Because I don't want to get lost in the
There's so many rabbit holes.
The sauce.
Yeah.
Wait, can I ask?
Yeah.
So are you saying, it sounds like I'm trying to make a distinction. You're saying culturally it was understood, but I'm also wanting to understand the mechanics of like, is that actually true? Like saying there's a person that, you said Hermes became a god.
Yes.
Is there stuff in the Bible or anything like that makes that like possible? Like, is there something that they could have done to breed with the Nephilim enough that would have been like a legitimate thing to void their rights as even like a human? Or is it just like, it's like a cultural thing?
It's a cultural, religious, polytheist thing.
Like a belief?
Like a belief, a doctrine, a constitutional doctrine of polytheism. That being a god is made up of 2 things. One is having unlimited knowledge. That's the knowledge aspect. The other one would be to be immortal. So if they're going to create human gods in the end time to take the mark of the beast, they're going to have to provide both, right? If they want people to buy into that. Why would I join you to fight the God of the Bible? Because I can be God in a physical universe.
Which is transhumanism.
Is part of it, yeah. Certainly part of it. Just to give you a sort of an understanding of that. And so this is a very special case. of somebody who is receiving most of the knowledge from the fallen angels or the gods, that is using this knowledge to become greater than what he is. Typically a demigod. In the Hermes tradition, though, there's a Trismegistus aspect that's attached to it, which means 3 Hermes. Typically, the Hermes mythos has 3 individuals there. Depending on which version, there's 2 versions. One has 2 before the flood, 1 after. The other one has 1 before the flood and 2 after. So in the version before, you would have the God aspect that is providing the knowledge. So in this case, Azazel, or chief god, would be providing most of that knowledge. And the head priest that receives the knowledge that starts the Zoroastrian or Enochian mysticism before the flood. And then in the other version, you have one that's before the flood. Traditionally, it would be Enoch, son of Cain, or Hermes as one individual. And then you would have a Hermes after the flood who finds the 2 pillars of the ancient knowledge, takes it to Nimrod, and then another one that's related downstream in Egypt for alchemy. This has, with the Eastern Zoroastrian version, with Zoroaster, who inherits the mythos and where the religion comes from. And originally, Zoroaster is a giant named Garamud before the flood. It takes the name sort of patronymically. I won't go through all of the etymology on this. And then starts the religion of before the flood. And then you have one that's shortly after the flood that sometimes is associated with Ham. In some mythology as Chem Zarathustra. And then you have a Zoroaster, 2 versions again, sometimes around 1200 BC, sometimes 600 BC, according to secular history, that starts the Zoroastrian religions. But it's all that ancient religion. So understand, in polytheism, there's a lot of allegory. All 3 characters are real. All may not be gods.
Gotcha. So would it be safe? Okay. Sorry, do you see the delineation I'm trying to make between like what's culturally believed versus what we know to actually?
Yeah, they weren't real gods, is what you're trying to say. They were, the definition of God, according to the polytheistic narrative, would be different than our Christian interpretation of
God of the Bible.
God of the Bible, sure. And the fallen angels, which were described as deified figures with special physical abilities. And
the gods of polytheism are fallen angels.
Yes,
that's.
But
but the offspring are demigods. They're not real gods.
Right.
They're lesser beings created with some immortal aspects, which is why life was removed to be immortal in a physical body in Genesis 6:3, so that you wouldn't have a physical counterfeit immortal spirit passed on into a body that would live forever.
So let's take the example of Hermes. So basically, Hermes was a human that was believed to have transformed into a god.
Yes.
So technically Hermes died, but is what happened, is it like his legend just lived on and he still was like a real god?
Yes.
Even though he died?
Yes.
Okay.
And in
that
their
makes a lot of sense.
Belief system, his knowledge that he accomplished was able to have him reincarnate to be a god.
Got it.
Right?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question because you brought up Nimrod. Nimrod, was he a demigod?
Well, the language is a little bit unclear. We have the lineage from Cush suggesting he's human. But something changes. Nimrod became a mighty one. Nimrod, Kal-El, Gibor. He became a mighty one. Gibor is the singular for Gibborim. Kal-El means to change somehow, ritually through the process, perhaps sexually, perhaps some way, but he breaks his vow, he breaks his covenant, something changes with him. Could be the knowledge being brought by Hermes to him, according to the polytheists. What's interesting about Kal-El, if that sounds familiar, think about superheroes, and understand giants were called heroes. Superman. I mean, we get Clark Kent, but I mean, what his name is Kal-El. His father is Jor-El of the house of El. And El was a demigod, parent god of Baal. Both created giants, one before the flood, one after the flood.
So Nimrod, it seems like, took the same path as Thoth in that he was a human that became something more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is why he's so important to the secret societies and Gnostics. He takes this knowledge that Hermes brings that was saved. I won't go through the whole myth here, or accounting from the Polychronicon and the history of Freemasonry, but he takes that knowledge to build Babel City, to build Babel Tower, antediluvian knowledge that we're still catching up to. And he is recognized as the first Grand Master of Masonry after the flood, who writes the first constitution for the polytheists after the flood.
There's got to be something else. I've thought about this a lot going on at Babel.
Yes. I mean, how does, if you look at what Josephus talks about Babel in the book of Yasher, and then look at what the Bible says, there's something going on there with knowledge that's unaccounted for. Because as one people talking one language, anything they decide they're going to do, they'll be able to do. Well, where does that knowledge come from? I mean, the one language doesn't do that. Maybe it allows for cooperation, but we know how long it takes to develop knowledge through our history.
Yeah.
It wouldn't explode into something crazy, but yet he starts a rebellion against God. And in the outside biblical accounts, we have him climbing the ziggurat and threatening God, saying, if you get out of line again and try and bring the flood again, I'm going to go into heaven and I'm going to kill you. I mean, not only is the language archetypically Antichrist with the narcissism, but to think building with mud bricks, you could somehow get into heaven.
There was something else going on.
He'd have to be absolutely insane or something else is going on.
Mm-hmm.
So in Hebrew, the definition for Babel is confusion of languages, because that's what happens there. But that name is also transliterated into Sumerian, and they have accounts of the Babel account. And in the Akkadian accounts, and in the Armenian accounts, and in the Aztec accounts in Central, they have accounts of Babel. And in the Akkadian one, you get a nugget that is priceless, that they do not define Babalu. ILU is a transliteration for EL, just as AL is for an angel or a god, as in Baal was Lord God. Babalu, you have God at the end, just as EL would be on what might be the original meaning to Babel. And then Bab means a portal or Stargate or something to that effect. Now you have a portal or Stargate of the gods. So if that was a technology, as people speculate and postulate that ziggurats, towers, and pyramids were and why they were created, now we're talking about technology we still don't have that was delivered to them, that was antediluvian knowledge that would permit them to go into another dimension. Just as CERN is trying to go into other dimensions with quantum computing and AI and all the other things that they're combining in with that technology. So he would now have the ability to do two things. He could actually go into heaven and have a war in heaven, as Antichrist does in Daniel 8, but he doesn't, because of it's not permitted to finish, and that's because that's reserved for the end time. But he also would have the ability to go into Sheol or Hades, where the pit prison is located, to release the gods that he's worshiping and let them out, just as in the end time, that's reserved for the pit prison in Revelation 9, just before the midpoint of the last 7 years to be opened. So he's a typical Antichrist type figure where something changes with him in a position where he has control over all of the Noahites, Adamites, putting one universal religion on him and wants to bring about a war with heaven. It's an archetype for the end time and other things that play down through history.
Which is also prophesied in regards to the Antichrist, because isn't it in Revelation something that this figure will become somehow raised from the dead or heal or something?
Well, he receives a mortal head wound.
Right.
Mortal, he dies.
And then reincarnates or comes back.
Yeah, so what happens we don't know. But there's some sort of technology or ability to do that with this individual, and he's also associated with the one that comes up out of the pit in Revelation 17. So there's probably a correlation there that he's going to be either possessed by demons, disembodied spirits of giants to do that, just as demons come out of his mouth in Revelation 16, or Azazel, who would be the leader, Abaddon Apollyon, coming out of the pit prison, might be avataring in him and being able to do it. Or you could also interpret that in 2 Thessalonians 2, and in Revelation 13, where he receives the power from the dragon. Dragon could be a seraphim angel, as in Azazel, as in Satan himself, as a serpent and a dragon, as he's described in Revelation 12, as well as a cherubim. He has multiple aspects. For people that are checking the facts on me here, he's also an archangel. He's also a morning star order, and a few other ones, just to get some of those on the table.
Covering all your tracks here.
Yeah, well, just so that people know that I'm not sort of just making it up as I go here. So, but in 2 Thessalonians 2, he receives all of his power from Satan. So it could be both as well that are influencing Lord Maitreya, which is Lord Mithra, as you take that from Sanskrit and into the Avestan Old Persian language. And that Mithra is just another name for Azazel. And just as this, I won't spend too long on this rabbit trail, but it's kind of interesting. The god that the Templars worshipped, that started all of our modern secret societies as we have them today, as that one base central organization before it was taken down, worshiped Baphomet, means Father Mitra.
You good, Jake?
I was just writing that down. That is very interesting.
You're going to fact check him?
No, that is, if people would like to know a fun fact about the show, if I'm on my phone, it means I'm writing down material to put in the trailer.
Okay, so we have Nimrod, who's an Antichrist figure.
Yes.
We seem to have a lot of these through history.
Mm-hmm.
I won't ask you to speculate on who would be an Antichrist figure today, but when you look at the Third Reich, World War II, we have another Antichrist figure that seems to fit the archetypical pattern for somebody who wants to basically cause mass destruction and chaos. And
and it's such a fascinating look at World War II and Adolf Hitler in that sort of comparison. So, one of the things that National Socialism does and the secret societies do in conjunction to form National Socialism, creating a religion out of theosophy, which is an extension out of Gnosticism that goes rogue as Ariosophy or Aryan theosophy. You have this altar of Zeus that gets discovered in, say, 1870 or so, and then that zone, it's going to end up in Berlin as this Greek altar. And so that's rather odd that they would prize that and then create special museum for that. That's the altar that would be comparative, that would be set up as Antiochus did, Epiphanes did in about 180 to 200 BC, as recorded in the Maccabees of the KJV Apocrypha, where you have an abomination type of thing that is going to happen in the end time with Antichrist that Jesus prophesies to go see Daniel and learn all about. And so you have this coming together of religion, secret societies, and a political movement that is going to create something unique. And they, as I say, they create their own Reichschurch, their own religion. And so one of the things that the National Socialists, and they're called the National Socialist Workers' Party, Nazism. So people who don't think this isn't socialism, that is some right-wing thing, that's progressivism redefining history so that we don't understand that progressivism was the Western form of National Socialism that had to go back underground after World War II for obvious reasons, until they could rewrite history and resurface again.
And what is that today? I'm trying to connect the dots on that.
Well, when you see politics of progressive politics, as in used by the Democrats in the United States, or with liberals and New Democrats in Canada, they call themselves progressives.
Oh.
Right? That was that progressive.
So that's the same.
It's the same. They have similar policies. They haven't committed genocide yet, but typically communism, socialism, and all of those types of movements are left-wing movements, including anarchism. That all comes out of social masonry created by the secret societies that was used to bring down, through communism, the virus nation bloodlines that included, went out of Russia and in China as a couple of examples. I won't spend time on that because that's a different rabbit hole. But understand that this is the National Socialism that is created to offset communism that goes rogue in Russia and funded by the secret societies and the bankers and the Bushes and all of those other ones with the pseudo blue bloods in North America. So as we start to contemplate what this new religious geopolitical party is, it's quite a mix. And one of the artists that the Nazis and Adolf Hitler in particular likes is Wagner. And he actually goes to a Wagner play before the announcement of the Reichschurch in 1933. And between him and a few other writers, you get this leader name coming out of that's going to be assigned to him called Führer.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
And that's what he adopts as this leader, as this Antichrist type figure. Mm. So Hitler is imagining something called the Third Reich. It has a German history of Reichs that were trying to be established, but Reich is 1,000-year reign. He is trying to create a millennium, a counterfeit millennium, just as Antichrist will promise that as his new age. And so he's going to go on a march of destruction to try and take over the world militarily so that he can introduce his religion on the whole world. So what does Antichrist do in the end time? You have one universal religion that comes first with Babylon and then is replaced by Antichrist, puts his own religion in that the fathers don't know. That last part comes out of Daniel 11. And he's going to take over the Seventh Empire, become the Eighth Empire, and a world government that comes at the start of the last 7 years with the Seventh Empire of 10 kings. So he is going about things in the same way Antichrist does. And he's going to try and create genocide that we understand as Holocaust against the Jewish people and all the people that follow God. And he's going to extend that to other genocidal targets as well. He's just dealing with priority number one, even though he's doing some of that on the side anyways with other peoples. And so we're going to have persecution of the church in the end time. Right? So you see another analogy. You see a rampant rise in technology that is not explained by secular historians. What do I mean by that? Well, you have a bankrupt nation that he takes over. That's going to become the most powerful nation less than 10 years from there. And he's going to start World War II. And so he creates a blitzkrieg strategy, and all of the weapons haven't even been invented for that yet. Right? It's a futuristic strategy not been introduced that he's going to introduce as he starts to invade other countries. So you're going to have technology that goes with this. So they start with things like the Tiger tank and the Panzer tank. Well, that's still the same profile that's used to this day for tanks. That low profile. And
perfectly balanced, fast.
And has a power to destroy with its weaponry far above and of longer distances than any other tank in the world. It is so far beyond the technology being used in Russia, the US, England, allies around the world, that if they had enough time and could produce enough, that in itself would win them the war. But they don't stop there. They start creating the jet engine. Comes out of nowhere. Nobody else is developing this, and they don't have enough time to develop it. But if they could develop enough of an air force, they would win the war and would have knocked off England fairly quickly. They almost beat them doing that with using the Messerschmitt over the Spitfire. But this would give them a technological edge, given enough time to produce enough that they could win. But they don't stop there. They create missiles and the rocket technology that we use for the NASA project that was all sort of gathered up in Operation Paperclip after World War II. And they're creating this bell-shaped thing that we don't know what it is. We have documentation on it. We have some references to it, but it seemed to be some high level of technology that people speculate that might be part of interdimensional travel. And it's the same shape as you see on shapes on religious buildings all through India. That can't be a coincidence, especially when you get their swastika comes out of Eastern religions that they adopted into it from Hinduism and Buddhism. And so you have this technology that is rapidly ramping them up that the Allies don't have. Where does this information come from? Well, what they say is through, and this is where you get the connections back to the religion and to the secret societies, that the adepts of those organizations, who are the leaders with the secret societies, like the German Orden, or the Thule or Tula societies, and multiple other ones, they were talking to their spiritual guides. They were talking to possibly aliens. They were talking to demons. They were talking to the White Brotherhood, celestial white masters, maybe even fallen angels, not likely, but probably these lower possibilities. Whomever you want to believe that they say they were talking to somebody and receiving this knowledge. Well, that sounds a lot like what's going on today. That they're trying to ramp us up to angelic technology that was before the flood. But you have everything that is in play with World War II and National Socialism that is a template to understand what is going to happen in the end time, but on steroids, so to speak, in higher doses of everything. And he is just one of many Antichrist wannabes that come along as he's trying to set up. What he's trying to do is set up the seventh beast empire. And each of the beast empires after the flood will have an Antichrist wannabe. and they all have the same religion, a daughter of Babylon. Babylon, as we understand that as a mystery religion in Revelation 17, as you take that back to its original word for Babylon, it's rooted in the Hebrew word for Babel. This is the Babel religion, implemented on the Adamites by Nimrod as the archetype. This is the religion that is going to be resurfacing, that is the mother religion, that Revelation 17. The other ones were the daughters. This is the old religion coming back. This is the original sort of version that will be put into place. And so you have this template to understand history through the daughters of Babylon. Each of the beast empires, if people aren't familiar with who the beast empires are, we get them listed in Daniel 7 with Babylon as the first one. It isn't the first one, but the first one that's named, Babylon, followed by Persia, Medes, Greece, Rome. And before that, you would have had Assyria and Egypt. And then you'll have the end time empire. So you'll have 7 of those of the empires. And that each of those empires will have an interrelationship with Israel and Judah, just as Israel comes into a nation inside of Egypt, as Assyria does the first dispersion. I won't go through each of the things as the curses of the covenant start coming down with all of the beast empires, but Rome is the last one that does the diaspora of the southern kingdom of the Judeans, as still in place today, except that now we have Israel, people, at least a remnant of them in Israel, as we approach the end time. So each of these empires, you would have had like a Nebuchadnezzar, a terrible one. He is the terrible of nations, as he's described. A terrible one, Eretim, in Ezekiel 32. These are those ones that are so terrible and did such terrible things to humankind. They were put into the sides of the pit prison, along with the strong El. So you have the angels and the disembodied spirits of the giants talking to another terrible one that's an Antichrist type figure as Pharaoh, who would in that historical period be Necho, and talking about this whole scenario. And this is the time of Nebuchadnezzar, the terrible of nations of the beast empire, who's going to come and destroy all of the nations and set up that beast empire. So you have beast empire, have Antichrist figures in each of them, whether or not you want to look at Alexander, who would be the one that's in Daniel 8. Mm-hmm. And you can also get the 7 beast empires and the 8th coming out of that as it lines up with Revelation 17. Same count. Alexander, 4 notable ones that get split into 4 empires. Rome is part of that. Rome succeeds. Rome is the revised empire and then the 8th empire. So you get the same number, just more information. No contradiction, just different allegory. And so when we look at Antichrist figures, you could look at Julius Caesar as possibly an Antichrist figure who had declared himself a god, right? As well as Nebuchadnezzar. So you have these empires that Michael fights against, not from coming, because they all come. Just as the end time empire will come. Fights against who? Probably from Antichrist rising, because that's reserved for one individual for the end time. So,
and Michael doesn't fight at the end time, correct?
Well, he leads the army in Revelation 12 to fight Satan and his angels, and that's the same timing as Antichrist goes into heaven and throws down some of the starry host, and at the same time Antichrist comes to power. So one lines that chronologically of the end time at the same time. So when Michael is sitting in Daniel 12, he's going to stand up as he's listed in Revelation 12, also at the same time. And how do we know that's the midpoint? because Judea, who flees from the wilderness at the midpoint at the abomination, is going to be protected for 3.5 years, as it's described in Revelation 12. So we have that period of time when Antichrist starts his rule in Revelation 13, same time frame correlated in Revelation 17, and it's the war in heaven.
Why these things have to know, I think we talked about this last time, they have to know that you can't defeat El Elyon. Why would you fight with them? Is it just that they're so far past the moment of indictment that they just have to, even though it's statistically improbable and they have thousands of years of history to prove that, they're just like, well, maybe there's a 0.001% chance.
Yeah. So I would say that that's accurate to a certain point in time. So I think that when they did the rebellion, and understand that all of the angels, and particularly Satan, knew God fairly intimately. Mm-hmm. And they knew how powerful God was, but they still rebelled. And what Satan said is, I want to be like God. I want to raise up my throne to be in heaven like God. But he wants to rule. I don't believe he could defeat the Almighty, but he thought he might win a negotiated peace treaty, so to speak, as we would understand in our language today, so that he could live in a realm on his own to be like God with the fallen angels that followed them and whatever creations that they wanted to create, which would be the earth and whatever comes with that in terms of the authority that they had to rule over, that they still rule over to this day. So whatever that is, that's the realm that they would be looking at. So they actually thought they could, by destroying the resolution to the angelic rebellion, Adamites, and the people from day 6 before, as we talked about, by leading them away from God so that God would have to destroy them and to be remembered no more, that might justify their rebellion, so that all the creations that God creates are going to rebel. Right? And using that with their legalese and their arguments that we deserve, and it would be merciful to let us live on our own. And this operates right up to the time of the first coming of Jesus. And this is the time where they're going to say that whatever God has in mind, we're going to stop it. And they see stopping it as slaying the Word made flesh, put into a soul and a body created by the Holy Spirit, that the Word, who is Spirit, becomes flesh in. Oikoterion, dwelling place for a spirit. Mm-hmm. So that he can atone for our sins, which is going to be the net result. And they are going to look at it that if we kill him, or we have the people of the earth kill him, and the people they created to bring him about turn against him to have him crucified, that is going to be one of two things. One, he's going to either remain dead or unable to fulfill his commission. And B, just the idea that even the Israelites rejected their Messiah, their Redeemer at that time, to be more accurate, the southern kingdom, the Judeans, that they would make their case, right? This was the point where they thought they would win. But they don't know everything. And God was creating something new, something that they didn't understand, something that they didn't believe was possible at that time, that there was going to be a resurrection. And how do we know that? The first book of 1 Corinthians says if the archons, the rulers, had known about the crucifixion or known about the resurrection, they wouldn't have had Jesus crucified. So we know they didn't know that. Mm-hmm. And then when Jesus was in the grave, in 1 Peter chapter 3, he's going to go visit these imprisoned spirits. Right? And he's going to, and I always say this is where I speculate that he's telling them that when he rises on the Sunday, your rebellion is over and you're going to be sentenced to the pit. You're going to be sentenced to the lake of fire. And I always say I speculate that, but the fact of the matter is I'm speculating just quoting that. But if you now loop in Ephesians 4, I think starting in about verse 8, Colossians 2, about verse 8, and all of Psalms 68, you're going to get the whole story to this. So a little bit of homework. The highlight is in Colossians 2, in the passage where it's talking about elementals, part of the hierarchy that enslave us in the world, fallen angels. Jesus created a spectacle.
He embarrassed them.
He embarrassed them. And in Ephesians 4, he marches them out. And in 68, and then you realize when it says it's something to the effect in the KJV, the captives of captivity, or I might have inverted that as an odd term. That's the same phrase that's used in Psalm 68 where you get the whole story. And in there, you're going to get the details where he's going to march them to Mount Hermon. And they're going to pronounce judgment on them at that time. So it's all related. When Jesus is in the grave, what's happening here? And that's the location in Matthew 16 where Jesus takes his disciples to Mount Hermon, creates his church, and then announces at the gateway to Hades, the place where Baal would go back and through every day to observe and rule over both Hades and Sheol and the earth that he had authority over as the chief of the gods, of the council of gods at Mount Hermon. He announces he's building his church that even the gates of Hades will not succeed over. So he announced what he was going to do, but didn't show them how, and then completed that in Ephesians 8. So after that, it's only spite. They know they're going to the lake of fire. So now they just want to destroy as many of us as possible.
Got it. Okay.
Now, those who follow him, whether it's humans or their offspring and the descendants of those offspring, the fallen angels continue to convince them that you can win. But the angels know they can't. They know how powerful God is. God would have to relent. God would have to have mercy. But prophecy says otherwise, that he won't do that.
Got it. Okay, I have another question, unless you want to hop in.
You're good.
So when you talk about the bloodlines of everything, are all of these Antichrist figures, do they fit inside of a Nephilim bloodline?
That's a really good question. And it's one of the topics that I cover off in book 2. And so I make the case that, yes, that is the case. And if you go back to Ezekiel 32, we're talking about Pharaoh Necho there, who is of demigod bloodlines, because they believe that they take their bloodlines back to a specific patriarch, giant. They may have other bloodlines grafted in, and to a specific god or fallen angel. And so all the ones that are talked about as terrible ones in Ezekiel 32, and it gives us a few of quite impressive names there, including Asher or Assyria, which is rather interesting, and Tyrus. And so, yeah, those are giant demigods talking to giant demigods on the throne of Egypt. So now let's go to Persia and the Achaemenid dynasty. I document this for people in book 2, show you the sources on it, is that they believe that their bloodline goes back to the Aryans. Okay, who are the Aryans? These are blonde-haired, blue-eyed, pale-skinned giants of Atlantis and or Tula and or Asgard. Could be separate civilizations, could be the same allegory for the same location. And this are the same people that the Nazis believed they descended from Tula, which is one of their Thule, as one of those secret organizations that I talked about. And there's a fellow named Hans Horberger that was an astronomer, but also a writer, who they helped draft into their Vril, something in the blood, Rosicrucian doctrine, and Grail, bloodlines of Jesus, bloodlines of the giants in their theology, bloodlines of the house of David, into their Ariosophy, Arian theosophy that went rogue from theosophy, and that if they could backwards engineer that DNA, they could create new giants. And until they could get that technology developed, they were going to go forward with genetic, what would we call it? I'm trying to look for the word, but of intermarriage of people of the same traits together to create a new Nephilim, the new man, as they called them. They were trying to create new supermen. Mm-hmm. And they believed that they were direct descendants of the people of Asgard, Tula, or Atlantis. It seems to be one location with that particular empire. And Atlantis was trying to create, before the flood, a world empire with the Atlantean religion, which we would understand as Zoroastrian or Enochian mysticism, with 10 kings in that world empire, just as Antichrist receives power from those 10 kings in the end time, because nothing is new under the sun. What was will be again. And the understanding of this only brings grief and sorrow, as Ecclesiastes 1 tells us. So yes, these Antichrist figures have been with us all of the time. And the epistles of John even states that even now the Antichrist spirit is amongst us, trying to do what it always does, and will be with us and will come to fruition with Antichrist.
Okay, so that puts new color around the Third Reich's obsession with pharmacology and pharmaceuticals. If they were trying to gene edit,
yep,
to backdoor into, that's basically what you're saying, reverse engineering and changing the bloodlines,
yeah,
through pharmacology, right?
Yeah. And they probably even think that they're going to somehow create an immortal spirit, but unless that counterfeiting of the spirit hasn't run out of its ability to re-counterfeit and hasn't been superseded by spirits coming afterwards from heaven, as what human spirit comes from, then no matter what they do, they can't create that superhuman unless they do something that we're not really aware of how they would be able to do that to this day. And it's interesting you use that word pharmaceutical, because we get in the book of Revelation sorceries. In the King James Version, magic spells, as it's in other translations. And it's these sorceries that Babylon, the universal religion before the one that Antichrist imposes when he comes to power, because Antichrist and the 10 kings will destroy Babylon at the midpoint in the prophetic hour. And that's a very significant hour at the midpoint of the last 7 years, just into it. Into the last half, just into it, that this word pharmakeia is the Greek word for that. Pharmakous, pharmakos, 3 different variations. It's same word, 3 different derivatives. One's a plural, for example. And that's the source word for pharmaceuticals that we understand it today. And that's how Babylon is said to seduce the 10 kings and everybody in the world. There is going to be something with pharmaceuticals, whether it's in just the drug form, legal and illegal, that is going to seduce us or dumb us down or prepare us to accept what they're going to tell us. But the pharmaceuticals also create vaccines. And the new technology has message technology. I don't think that is the final version of it. I think it goes digital in the same aspect as you start to link in digital technology, AI, quantum computing, and all of that technology types to
neural linkages.
And neural linkages and beds, hospital beds, which would be, again, the modern version of a sarcophagus, as the polytheists would believe, as a healing chamber. That is all going to be merging. So that pharmakeia is part of the religious control levers of Babylon, which is not just a universal religion, but a city, because it's said to be a city 9 times in Revelation. It's a geopolitical organization because it rides the beast of empires, implication holding reins to control them, which is why the 10 kings will grow jealous of Babylon. And it is some sort of economic trade organization because all the merchants and kings of the world grow rich from her. So it's going to control all of that as well.
We're like almost there.
Yeah, it's the precursor to the beast system.
Yeah. Yeah. What's funny, not funny, that's not funny. What's interesting is you see all of this in fiction, fantasy fiction, sci-fi. Everything is built off of this futuristic state in society.
Yep.
That there's gene editing, there's healing chambers, there's advanced nanotech healing pharmaceuticals, and now we're starting to see like CRISPR from China. They can create a superhuman with that new technology right now.
Yeah, imagine being able to build everything from the quantum level and understand that building from the quantum level includes all dimensions. We can't imagine what that technology that is coming, but this is the technology that was in place before the flood.
We're still catching up.
We're still catching up, and I think they're trying to download that quickly. There's one other aspect that I'd just like to connect back in that connects into a number of things that we were talking about in terms of the bloodlines of the beast empires and Antichrist and a pedigree. So expect a pedigree that Antichrist is going to use as part of his credentials. There's an interesting mythos that goes around Alexander, who again is associated with Antichrist, that the Antichrist in the latter times rises from. His mythos is that and his father, who has one eye, this is also how he loses an eye. He loses the eye for peeking through a keyhole to see something. And the god Amun, which is the same god which would be Zeus or Kronos in the Greek mythology, is having sex as a serpent, as a Uraeus god, with his mother Olympia to create him. And so because Alexander's father saw this, he loses an eye for, peeking in on that, right?
Oh, no.
Right. So we have a seraphim type angel creating in the mythos a demigod, which becomes Alexander, who declares himself as a god. Right. And he's setting up a beast empire and is basically unstoppable because an Antichrist has the ability, or an Antichrist close wannabe will have an ability to bend the world to him and his desires for a short period of time.
Dang.
Oh my gosh, dude.
One quick question on that.
One really simple question.
Yeah. By the way, in book 1, I tell that story about Alexander and document the sources for it.
Okay, amazing. How do people get the document of the two creation, Genesis 1, Genesis 2?
Get hold of me through my website.
Okay.
Contact the author. Be patient. I am running more than 3 months behind right
still
now.
Catching up from the last episode.
It's been very busy, and I've got other projects on the go. So,
deep end, don't play.
Yes, be patient. I will answer them all.
Okay, so when you study all of this stuff and you know what's coming, because we haven't even gotten to the point to talk about some of the biblical prophecy. Have you ever studied something that has made you afraid? Do you have any fear tendencies that show up?
Well, in the beginning I did. And because you're talking everything from, prehistory and giants and gods and evil things and then end time prophecy, and you don't have a full understanding of it. So, but I got to a point where I understood it. I didn't have to like it, but I understood it, and I was much more comfortable in understanding it and how the outcome will come about. And so, I have peace with that. And that allows me to not be paralyzed by it, but to now take it and say, how do I communicate this? Which is a process I had to go through. And one of the things I would tell Christians is that when you decide to follow God, you can't imagine some of the places he's going to take you and have you do that you don't want to do. But when you do, there's large rewards for that.
Yeah. Okay. This is a personal question, so you might have to cut this. I don't know the rules for some of this stuff, but when you talk about pharmaceuticals, vaccines, I'm not what do they call it, science denier or anti-vax. But how do you process through knowing the Third Reich created antibiotics? I'm pretty sure we cloned all of their research and brought it over here. How do you know what's good versus what is bad?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I always like to start off by saying knowledge is neither good nor evil. It's how it's used. So everything, unfortunately, has a double-edged sword or two-sided on the coin. And we typically use everything for evil. I don't think anybody thinks therapeutics to help people in healing or anything in medicine that would help cure people and take pain and horrible scenarios away from people would be considered evil. But, and certainly Jesus healed, right? But how is that applied? What is the purpose for that?
Right.
And that's what you have to delineate against it. And also to understand that the illicit knowledge wasn't provided to humans for a reason, or the knowledge that was to be kept from us, because we don't have the wisdom, the spiritual wisdom yet to harness that. And certainly the fallen angels seemingly didn't as well, right?
It got out of hand.
Yeah, and then it's the fallen angels who give us this knowledge, knowing the damage it can do for a purpose, so that we would try and destroy ourselves from the face of the earth. But they end up having to create another race now to do their handiwork to try and complete things. And so when we look at that kind of knowledge, it starts to help us understand there has to be safeguards then put in when we go forward, when we're being resurrected. And so God prophesies that to us through the Bible, where we're going to receive something new that's a body like Jesus that wasn't there before with this resurrection, that can go into heaven like Jesus. We're going to receive that kind of body, and he's going to write his laws on our hearts or on our spirits so that we can follow those rules. So something changes in terms of that resurrection, and as a safeguard to that we will be able to follow God. And if we thought we were going to somehow do it on our own, just as being resurrected, God already knows he has to help us. And he has, whatever that means, it's going to be there so that we don't fall into the same pit, so to speak, that the angels did that rebelled.
So just you use wisdom and you pray for help, essentially.
Yes, you have to. And we're all here to trying to figure out why we're here. And then to make a choice. And I might have said this on shows past. Everybody has a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Choose God or choose the other side. Some people will say, I don't want to choose. No decision is a choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So learn as much as you can. Decide for yourself what you believe, and then be comfortable with that. And I would encourage people, monotheistic, polytheistic, secular, agnostic, choose the God of the Bible. It's the only thing that has a permanent resolution to the insanity of what goes on in this world.
Amazing. That feels like a great place to land the first episode, because I have 20,000 other questions, but I don't want to ruin the flow. That you just gave a beautiful ending. So let's end it there. You good?
I agree.
All right. Love you guys. See you on the next one. I was about to kick off of psychedelics.
Yeah, me too.
But then when you said that, I was like, oh, dang it. We have to, because you just brought it into a perfect landing, and then I'm like, psychedelics.
Oh, my word.
We'll start the next one with psychedelics.
Sure.
It doesn't seem to be a recent phenomena, but it seems to be gaining a lot of steam right now.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on this?
And when you say psychedelics, you're talking about drugs.
Yeah, mind-altering
things, yeah. And expect an evolution of that into things that we haven't seen before, that probably will interconnect with digital technology, quantum, AI in ways that we can't imagine fully. So this is an ancient ritual, understanding, pastime that most people don't fully understand, that when we're talking about psychedelic drugs, talking about drugs that were originally created to create an environment for the religious worship and communication that they were looking for. So most people who take psychedelic drugs are just looking for that high that used to be called, when I was growing up, a trip. Mm-hmm. Hopefully a good trip versus a bad trip in that jargon. But it's something that people, when they have a bad trip, they're encountering things that they had not intended, and some things not even imagined. And there's a reason for that, because that's a technology that comes out of pharmakeia, out of alchemy, out of ancient rituals and polytheism. And one of the things in polytheism that's also shows up in secret societies today as well is that they want to have communication with the spirit realm, with the celestial mafia, preferably, at the highest levels of the order, or at least with the Great White Brotherhood, or spiritual guides, or aliens, or whatever you want to throw into the mix that you think that you're communicating with. And they are communicating with beings, sentient beings. And what psychedelic drugs were designed to do was to create that portal for you to either astral plane or them to come in.
Astral plane or astral project?
Astral project.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
And that you are doing this experience that you want to fully understand before you go into, because once you create that door, you've permitted it. You can't close that without help. And we see this show up in various forms of entertainment. The most vivid portion, most vivid accounting, I would say, comes out of vampire and Dracula stories. And in the Dracula shows, which means son of a dragon, based on Vlad the Impaler, bloodlines to giants.
Yeah, you covered that more in the Land of the Giants episode we did.
Yeah. Well, for that vampire to enter into the house to attack you, you have to invite them in. So you might see them in some, tapping on windows and, trying to befriend you, but you have to invite them in. But getting rid of it, it's not so easy. And it's similar with demon possession. Right? Once you have a demon inside you, how do you get rid of it?
Well, it doesn't want to leave.
Yeah, it doesn't want to leave. And it's rightfully there based on you inviting it in. So knowingly or unknowingly, you're creating that opportunity for that to happen. And you're going to need spiritual help to deal with that. And your only power in this earth is through God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit to get it out. And if you let it back in again, it's 7 times worse to get rid of. And if you're doing it often, you may be inviting multiple numbers of different entities, as in legion, as one example that the Bible would provide for us. So we want to be careful of that. It's like hypnosis. It's similar that it puts you into that state where you create that opening. And so when we hear accounts of people going into hypnosis to find out about past lives, they're not hearing from past ancestors. They're hearing from a seducing spirit that is talking through them, that you just allowed somebody to create that opening. And they have knowledge. They're around. They know enough to deceive you. They don't even have to give a whole bunch, because we'll build a whole story around what they said, because it's playing to our biases when we accept those kinds of things. That's the same type of thing that these drugs are doing. So, I mean, whatever the alchemy and the ingredients that go in to make that happen, poppy seeds is one that you should be aware of. That would be, I think, the best example under the same sort of analogy that we're doing here, because if you look at a lot of ancient reliefs, you see these plants with these large round heads that are upside down, and they're drying, and they're used in rituals. And you see them with gods and other people. Poppies were associated, particularly in Greek mythology, with going to the other world as well. It's was with Persephone going to the other world where Hades was ruling. And it was a big part of that whole celebration, which incidentally began on All Hallows Eve. That doesn't end on October 31, but it'll go right through to November 11th. The Samhain polytheist ritual that's done all around the world is a longer event than what most people think. And so why do we have poppies associated on Remembrance Day, when we remember war heroes? Nephilim were warriors and heroes. We have poppies on November 11th, a prime number, at the 11th hour, on the 11th day, prime numbers forming 33. 3 times 11 is 33. Again, 3rd degree, 33rd degree. It's a celebration of the dead, just as you have all of these demon spirits coming through these portals on Samhain, on Halloween. So again, the imagery and the association of poppies on how it was used in the ancient world also brought on a state of sleep, as hypnosis is associated with. And in Greek mythology, they have the god of sleeps, and that they believe that the gods would visit, probably demigods, but maybe humans as well, in their sleeps, sometimes for good or bad. If you've ever had a demonic encounter in your sleep, you know it's distinct. And you know something's changed. And if you don't deal with it, it's not going to go well. And so you have to, if that happens to you, you're going to have to again, be prepared spiritually to cast that demon out. I speak from experience on that. I've had paralysis, but in the last, say, couple decades, it's been more into the dreams trying to catch you off guard. But something changes. You're not asleep. But again, you want to be careful not to create these portals. And I'm not saying I created a portal. If I did, I don't know how. What we do know is that there is some sort of interaction with certain people with more of the other world than with others. That could be from your genealogy, or it could be some things that you might have done to create that. Doesn't mean it has to dictate your future, but you have to deal with it.
One of the things I'm curious about with psychedelics, have you studied when people started doing them? Because the thought that comes to my mind is you're talking about psychedelics as a gate, but didn't at some point we used to be able to see angels and demons much easier? And like even now, like you hear people in Africa, they can see angels, demons, they can see entities, all these things. Do you see a place in history where people had to start using it because the veil got kind of separated much harder?
Yeah, I think so. So again, if we look at before the flood and after the flood, you see an evolution of change. And so you had the gods that walked amongst us before the flood. They created giants before the flood. And they provided us all of this knowledge before the flood. After the flood, you have the offspring gods that take over from the parent gods who go to the pit prison right away at the time of the flood. And then the offspring gods like Baal and Zeus and Osiris take over. And they're walking amongst us. And they're creating giants. But now the giants are somewhat different, as with the difference between the Rephaim and the Nephilim. Not as large, not as gifted, weren't created immortal from the beginning, something different. And then you have, after Babel, and you have a removal of these offspring gods as well, like the parent gods. There's other ones that move up and they still rule over this world. But something changes, is that we no longer have them walking amongst us. So something has changed. And so somehow there has been a limitation, so to speak, as the fallen ones, the Nephilim and their offspring, as they further indict themselves, I think there's more restrictions that have been put on. But if they're running full realm over where you live, and in some nations in this world that are fully polytheist, we see more activity of the spirits in those polytheist nations. And any Christians that have gone over there, some of them are actually terrified at as how much of that goes on over there, right? It's quite eye-opening. So I think that it still has a possibility to be almost visible, so to speak, or at least recognizable, but still not in the same way it was before. And then in the nations that have been more controlled through at least the population size of Christians and worship, I think it's even less, but not gone, because there's still a lot of polytheism in our society that have been running our civilizations all along. But it seems to be more pushed underground, more so to speak, and less public and more private. So I think all of that has something to do with why it's not the way it was once before. But I would suggest that if it's going to be like the days of Noah, like the days of Lot, as that sign comes to us in Jesus' oration of the end times, is that we're going to see more visibility. We're going to see the gods walk amongst us. We're going to see giants more in front of us, somehow, some way, somehow more present. We're going to see more demonic activity. We're going to see things that were like they were before, when the enemy, the invisible ones, which are the highest level of the hierarchy, are going to have less resistance to take on the consequences of what they're doing because they know their time is very, very short.
And they would walk among us again.
Yes. And if not before the start of the last 7 years, certainly by the time the pit prison is opened up and they're released sometime before the midpoint of the last 7 years.
Yeah. Back to psychedelics, there are some of them that they seems to take people to the same place every time. So it's not just an imprinting of a person's mind and imagination on something, because if that was like the disassociative ones, like ketamine, I don't think do any of this, but the classic ones like DMT, 5-MeO,
ayahuasca.
Yeah, that would be so coming from DMT would come from that.
Got it.
Psilocybin, which is like what the medicine men typically use, was like mushrooms and things. A lot of people are seeing the same things. I think DMT is linked to like clockwork elves, and then 5-MeO, the God molecule, is like, we're talking about something that completely shuts down an entire hemisphere of your brain. So it completely suppresses your default mode. It just doesn't seem like that's a good idea to turn that off.
Well, I mean, if you're talking like dwarves, those are elementals.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, elementals that are talked about in Galatians 4.
So they're not good. You don't want to see them, right?
Yeah, and elementals are the ones that help enslave us in this world. They're also, and that's the Greek word stoichion, and it can be used for an element of the world or these beings. There's two definitions, and it comes across and translated as rudiments in Colossians 2 that we talked about on the last show when Jesus was in the grave in the spectacle. It's in there as well. These are in the occult. There's 4 groups of elementals. These are spurious offspring of the fallen angels, of the gods, as the mythos takes it back. There may be something else going on there in part of that creation, because some of them are smaller than humans, like 3 groups. There's 3 groups, and this is common legacy around the world on all continents, and who knows what we're going to find in Antarctica. So you have mischievous ones, like leprechauns. You have good-looking ones, like Tinkerbell is portrayed as. And there's a whole list of these ones, and I won't go through all of them, just give one example of each. And you have ugly ones, and the ugly ones are like, dwarves that you mentioned. Dwarves make, in Lord of the Rings and in elemental mythology and mythos, they made the weapons for the demigods in the earth, just as they do in Lord of the Rings, right? There's one group of elementals that has UAPs or UFOs. They come flying through fairy domens. Domen's a word for portal. They come through with this technology. They're in charge of genealogies and knowledge and technology, and they would kidnap people. I put 2 accounts of these fairy kidnappings in book 1, and they are described exactly as the Greys and do the exact same things as the Greys do from an interdimensional perspective versus intergalactic. And they're actually called the Greys, the Grey Gnomes, or the Grey Neighbors, as the Scottish would call them. These are beings that were created and have to renew their DNA if they want to keep physical oikotarians or lest they become a demonic spirit. And these are the ones that are, if you're dealing with a drug that's designed to put you in contact with dwarves, what that tells us is that there's different types of psychedelics for different types of beings. And just so people say you didn't mention the 4th one, these are salamanders, as they're called. And salamanders are reptilians that typically live in the earth. Now, where do I get this from? This is from occult religion. These 4 groups of elementals are associated with earth, wind, fire, air, elements of the world. And yet we're told about these elementals so that we would understand in the New Testament who these beings are being talked about. And so we have to understand this is part of the hierarchy. As the visible hierarchy is part of the giants were and their descendants are, as they're still in a physical body, but if they lose their physical body, then they become part of the lower invisible ones versus the higher invisible ones of the fallen angels. So we need to understand that these beings that we're being put in contact with, they don't have our better interest at heart. All of these beings were created so the fallen angels wouldn't get blood on their hands, to destroy humankind from the face of the earth, to be remembered no more, so we do not reach our destiny, to be raised up to be like angels, and then to judge those angels for the crimes that they imposed on us, and then to be inheritors of eternity. So the reason why the fallen angels have these types of beings is that they know the power of God. There's a line they don't want to cross too soon because they may end up going to the lake of fire sooner. So they use their spurious offspring to do their dirty work.
Like arm's length.
Yes.
Yeah.
Plausible deniability, as you would hear the elite or the Elim would talk about when they are doing things that are crooked, evil, illegal. Plausible deniability set that up, that little bit of distance that I didn't do it. I may have been part of it, but I didn't do it.
Well, that sucks. So don't do psychedelics.
Well, you want to be very, very careful.
Yeah, I know.
Because you're not able to fully function in your normal self. It's designed to dumb you down as well, so that you don't resist.
Yeah.
And if you do resist, it's really going to turn into a bad trip.
There are, I think, several research centers and clinics that are beginning to experiment with therapeutic uses of like LSD. LSD in particular is a massive super compression of neuroplasticity. So they're using it for like trauma, PTSD, because you can take the brain's plasticity is such that it can change over time, but it just compresses all of this down into 1 or 2 doses. However, when you look at how most of like the people that I know are like using psychedelics, it's like to learn things, get information. Some of them are using it.
God, right?
Yeah, become more one with everything, and I think that that's just like it can be a big trap.
Well, yeah, and because it's a polytheist understanding, it's getting closer to the pantheon of gods or that hierarchy at whatever level you're making contact with. It's akin to rituals that are done in Tai Chi or yoga. So, and again, not that doing stretching is necessarily evil, but do not do it in a ritual sort of way, because it's designed to put you into contact with the divine essence of New Age, or the Brahman, or the Atma. And so if you are participating in it, don't be listening to music, because you don't know what that music was created for in terms of the ritual aspect. Don't do it in front of any sort of idols or anything that could be confused with the place where a ritual, polytheist ritual could take place, because you're doing it in that ritual, even though you may not realize that the idea is to put you in a state of mind to astral project or to let the divine essence come in.
So can that work even if somebody is unaware of the fact that like they're having like consent and like consent law, like you have to be at the age of consent. Is there an understanding of consent? Like, do you have to understand what you're doing for it to be treated as consent?
Yeah, it's a good legal question. And so we're left in a world where we don't see the rules. We don't know all the rules. And it's easy to fall and to be seduced.
Yeah.
And so it's subtle in the ways that they seduce us. So if you are looking for that experience, then you have given permission. If you're doing it and you didn't give permission, but something happens, but maybe not to the fullest degree, but something happens, and then you go back and do it again, you're now giving permission. Because you understood something was good or bad that came with it. Probably good because they want to seduce you to open that door up fully.
Okay, so these are obviously not good things. It seems to be like they're taking you into different realms. When people talk about going to different realms, I'm assuming you have like Hollow Earth involved in that as a realm. Is the ocean maybe like what? How does this patch into?
Yeah, Hollow Earth.
Not a light subject, by the way.
No, it's not. And it's something that people should consider more deeply than what you might first want to with the name Hollow Earth. That this is a concept that is in all religions, on all continents, all around the world. And who knows what we'll find on Antarctica. I suspect similar if there's been some sort of civilization there leaving records. And I think where the name comes from, it actually comes out of the book of Enoch, First Enoch, which is an eye-opener for most people. So when it's talking about what's in the earth, it's talking about these big hollow tunnels or tubes. Actually says hollow when it's describing them. But it's in reference to what it's leading into that go all throughout the earth. And it's a massive place. It has continents, it has waters and fountains and different locations. The location of the pit prison and 7 mountains down there, a place where God will go but to put his throne and use from when he enters into that region. So it has a biblical reference throughout the Bible as well. Because as I mentioned, we talked about the pit prison on the last show or this show previously, and the pit prison is in the earth. Hades and Sheol are in the earth. One's in Greek, one's in Hebrew for the word there. It's the realm where the fallen angels rule from, and where the pit prison is. Possibly where the lake of fire is, but that could be in a different location. So when it talks about hell in the Bible, it's talking about various locations. Sometimes it's just not clear which the location is unless you understand there's 3 specific aspects to what's in the earth. And that this has an understanding of not just physically in the earth, but also into another dimension. So we get a biblical premise for this. And portals in Hollow Earth, not called Hollow Earth, generally in the occult, but probably taken out of the book of Enoch as it has become more popularized, is a standard doctrine within polytheism. So people might hear of the planet Nibiru. Well, Nibiru actually isn't a planet that's coming. It may whether there's another planet coming or not. People confuse what Sitchin said with what it actually means in Sumerian. Nibruki is the word for earth. Nibiru is a crossing of the earth. It's in the earth where the gods ruled from, the Sumerian pantheon ruled from. And we get that crossing biblically with the travelers or the passengers in Ezekiel 39, which is the Hebrew word abar, which means to cross over to where the dead are. This is the home of the dead, the home of the demon spirits, the home of elementals, and possibly physically in the earth in part, but also for the spiritual ones that would be in the spiritual dimension. So we have to sort of understand it from that aspect. And you get various descriptions, of hollow earth in terms of whether or not it's completely hollow to being portals all over the world and different tunnels that go down. So you'll hear of places and names in most cultures, and some of the more common ones would be Shambhala and or Argartha or Argatha, depending on whether you leave that H in there or not. And this is home of Lord Maitreya and King Sudras. And King Sudras is this giant king who had a war and united the 10 tribes of the earth and implemented a universal religion before the flood in the subcontinent of India's allocations. And so it could be like Shambhala and Argatha are two separate places, or they're talking about the same one. But there's a duality in polytheism, so it could be both. And when you have like Admiral Byrd, who in 1948 discovers this portal to the inner Earth on the North Pole, and then in 1957, as I recall, discovers the South Atlantic, South Pole access as well. And the
South Pole can go to the Middle Earth too?
Yeah, and it goes all the way through. They're connected. And so when you start to connect some of the data points here, there's accesses to the same places. You know, there are continents, there are mountain ranges. This is a massive place on the physical side, let alone on the interdimensional side. And it's something that we should understand, because polytheists, it's not just what they believe, it's what they do with their belief system that's really important. And so when they present an alien mythos to us, and as we talked about with different aspects of the elementals, we have ones that are like the Greys. Well, we also have the salamanders, which are reptilians, which are also part of the alien mythos, right? And they're not coming intergalactically, they're coming interdimensionally. But yet we have this alien phenomena that we're going to need to be dealing with in terms of understanding it. It's certainly not going to be the story they give us up front, but it certainly provides a ruse to account for all of these different kinds of beings that are part of a galactic society, even though they're interdimensional beings. So I think the alien phenomenon is more interdimensional and not intergalactic, and for a lot of reasons, but it just seems to fit with the continuity of what we know happened in prehistory. So we're going to have to understand who these beings are that are going to be coming to give us knowledge, who are going to be wanting us to unite so that we can take our chair at the galactic table to fight the evil God of the Bible. And we need to understand that this message and this type of ideology is going to resonate with polytheists all over the world. And they're going to welcome them with open arms. And that it's going to permit a world government to come about, a universal religion. It's going to be part of all of the deceptions that will be happening in the end time, because nothing is new under the sun. What was will be again. It's going to be like the days of Noah, when the gods walked amongst us, when the elementals walked amongst us, when the giants walked amongst us. We're going to see that again somehow, some way, and Hollow Earth is as common as a legacy as the flood story is in the giant story.
Is there any ancient literature that deals with Antarctica?
Well, there's ancient maps that will show the true outline that we can only get today through our technology of the island continent of Antarctica. So when we look at accountings of Antarctica, we have to look at, was that a separate civilization, part of the seven, part of the 4, part of the 9, part of the 11, whatever that number is? And was that perhaps, as the polytheists look at it, as the parent civilization to what follows, as we know, as Atlantis and Mu and the other civilizations that some polytheists believe in, that in this original continent? Or was it the original home of Atlantis, as some people described, or another civilization through the disruption that happened with the flood somehow did a shift of the crust down to the south? And again, I don't know whether that's true or that's not, but there's been studies done and people looking at it that certainly make a interesting case that there was a shift of that, and that the timing of that would fit with an antediluvian society and the disasters that would have happened with the flood, because the Bible talks about some inexplicable catastrophes associated with the flood that are talked about in polytheist accounts. So you have the oceans being stripped bare. Well, when did that happen in our history? It talks about volcanoes exploding and earthquakes in some of these accounts. I'm talking about accounts in Amos, the book of Psalms, and the book of Job. I put all of these into the Atlantis chapter in book 1. So there seems to be an association with those catastrophes and Orion and Pleiades, which are significant constellations within polytheism. In polytheism, with the flood story, the 7 sisters of Pleiades, which comes out of Greek mythology, you have 3 sisters or 3 stars, or probably more like asteroids as an allegory, as coming from the Pleiades, that would hit the oceans and the continents around the world, that would start a conflagration of events, is the polytheist story that includes flood. And yet we have these odd associations with Pleiades and Orion that are so popular with the flood story of polytheism. So much so that they built temples to the 3 sisters in their polytheist Babel accounts at the foot of the pyramid there, or the ziggurat, or the tower, whatever that they were building. So you have this catastrophic conflagration of events that's also talked about in the book of Enoch, just to give a little bit closer association to the biblical accounts, that could cause the crust to shift. Or this is an even older civilization than what we think. Would be before Adam. It might even be before the creation of day 6. So that if there was something between Genesis 1 and 2 that people will call the gap theory, I would call it the renewal of the earth theory, in terms of Psalms 104, when God sends his Holy Spirit, the earth is renewed. Also has in Psalms 104 the foundations of the earth and the creation of angels, and more details about creation, so associated with that. And at the start of the earth, if it was renewed, is what we see with this chaos in Genesis 1:2, that the Ruach of the Elohim is hovering over just before Jesus, the light, comes in Genesis 1:3. And if you had a destruction by fire, that's accounted for in 2 Peter 3, that would destroy the earth down to its foundations, yet it would have the firmament collapse. And that's described in 2 Peter 3 as the planet, or the earth, that was in the water, that was out of the water in the beginning, that destruction is reserved for the end time, the destruction by fire. And so you would have a renewal of the earth in the first 6 days of creation, and that the firmament would have to be separated again, and it's called heaven. So it fits perfectly with the 6 days of creation in Exodus 20. So if that's the case, then it might be a civilization from back then. But I'm really I'm recreating Genesis 1:1-2 with saying that the earth became void and formless, just as the words would describe, and that God wouldn't create something, as it's described in Isaiah 45, that wasn't ready to be lived in. But instead of doing a whole recreation of heaven and earth, he just renews the earth.
Right.
So that's kind of how you would get there. With Antarctica, with the amount of politicians and scientists and important people that continually stream down there and come back and are sworn to secrecy, it has obviously more questions than answers, but what we see coming out of it is that what is there is going to change every preconceived idea of everybody in the world. Now, I don't think it changes everybody's, but it certainly is a significant change in how we're going to look at things. So it has to have a tie to prehistory in ways and in technology and history that is going to prepare us for all the other deceptions that are going to be coming. So we want to learn about Hollow Earth. We want to know its connection to Admiral Byrd and why most of his testimony is still kept secret, and to what is being kept secret and why there's so much attention there, and why the Nazis set up a naval base there in search of gray hollows and technology that we talked about previously as well.
So Admiral Byrd, can you give us a quick understanding of who that was? And
yeah, he was a significant individual in the Navy as an admiral of the United States there on military assignment, and brings earth-shattering information back. And this is 1947. If that year sounds rather coincidental, when was Roslyn? Did I get that town right for the alien encounter? Not Roslyn. The one in Nevada?
51.
No, that's Area 51. Alien, major
Roswell?
alien, Roswell.
Roswell.
Roslyn is a Masonic temple in Scotland. I know.
Yeah. Roswell.
Close, but no cigar. Thanks for the bailout on that. That's when aliens and the New Age movement starts with us in a significant way. Same year. Is that possibly a coincidence? I don't believe in that kind of coincidence. 1947 is the year Israel declares their independence. The war is fought in 1948, but you have to have Judah, the southern kingdom, back in the covenant land in the end time. It's very much an important year, and it's shortly after Operation Paperclip to collect up all of the knowledge that the Nazis had that may have been including, likely did include, with the advanced technology and weaponry that they were developing. And they developed a specific scientific organization to go worldwide to collect the Grail Hollows, like the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail. They went to India to find out whether they had actually could find the entrance to Shambhala. And they sent their navy, what was left of their navy, of their submarines, at the end of the war, when all hope was probably over, and you take the last of your resources to send to Antarctica, it was probably a Hail Mary to get additional technology to win the war or get help. Maybe there's, I know I'm speculating here, but maybe there were beings they were interacting with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were looking for that kind of help.
One thing I appreciate about, and the audience should know this, people like you or researchers in general, they're always clear about when they're speculating. So let me give you a quick hack. Like, if he says this is the way it is, you've researched it and you can prove it. When you're speculating, there's a good warning, and he said that a few times. So please don't email us and get all bent out of shape about this.
Yeah, and again, if we look at the obsession with National Socialism in Germany with Tula, the Norse understanding of Asgard, they're kind of the same location, and maybe Atlantis. That's how we come full circle. That maybe, and they believe that they were descended from the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryans that Atlanteans were described as. Everything starts to make some sense as you look at all the different circumstantial evidence why they're there. You know, it's all about their history, it's all about their religion, and it's all about developing technology to take over the world.
Nice.
I'm just sitting over here thinking about the Journey to the Center of the Earth movie that was made in like 2010 or something, and realizing, oh, okay. That's what this was all a picture of.
Yeah, and there's lots of books and things that were written about similar types of travels, right?
Yeah.
So into the earth. And again, I think it probably comes from a Western thing, you could say superficially from the Book of Enoch. But most of the elite are polytheists. Right? So they're writing about what they already know. And most of the famous authors were high-level adepts that they could write about these things. And the only thing they had to learn about was how to write properly. So that's why you have societies like the Inkling Society at Oxford to learn the craft, not the knowledge. Or that you had the Knights of the Helmet that Francis Bacon had started, or one that would be more familiar with people would be the Spear Shaker Society. That was used to develop the English language that was then used into the KJV Bible. And if Spear Shaker sounds awfully close to Shakespeare, you might be correct that there's a suspicious connection there that was a character, created as a cover story for Bacon's writing. Not that there wasn't an individual, but that name also goes back to Greek history, to Apollo and Athena, who had the spear that they would shake with their power as a weapon of the gods, and were the patrons of the arts.
Dang. Okay, I'd never heard of that. When you say that they learned to write, do you mean code? Or not code, but like, are they learning like a sort of encryption method in writing?
Yeah, a style to write, as they call it, mythopoetic, that comes out of the Inkling societies. And that was a Rosicrucian society that people like Lewis and Tolkien should not have been part of if they weren't royals. But they were. I have documents on that with their genealogies and their writings that I send out to people who ask. And that you would not be able to get into a Rosicrucian society if you weren't part of the secret societies, right? But there's no record of them being in the secret societies. That's because they're royals. In fact, Lewis has, within 2 generations, has genealogies back to the kings of England. And his family name goes back to the Royals of Llewellyn in Wales. And you can actually trace all of this. And I also trace Tolkien's bloodline back through Normandy and Germany and back to Norway as the Tolks. So what they're there for, how they get there, is they are adepts before they become an adult. And you're not allowed to take an adept title until you're 25 to 30 years old. So they're at Oxford getting education. They join a Rosicrucian society because they're higher than Rosicrucians already. They just don't have the title. That's how they get there.
You mentioned this on the last episode, and it messed a lot of people up because we all love C.S. Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the implications of that? Because like he seems to be a Christian and all of this stuff.
Well, the first thing I would say is pretty much all of our entertainment's polytheist. So, and you know by the fruit that it bears in terms of the stories that it's talking about and the characters and the locations and the magic and whatever else. Yes, I'm not here to divide Christians. I'm just saying be careful with this. Mm-hmm. That the things that he's talking about, like portals.
Mm-hmm. The wardrobe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And satyrs. And Aslan as an incarnation. And Aslan is based on Narasimha, a lion god who's an avatara of Vishnu.
Really?
Just as just as Buddha was an avatara of the avatar Vishnu to create the Buddhist religion. And Mitra, Lord Maitreya, is an avatar as Shiva is. I think they're closely connected, just different versions of the same god. Lord Mitra comes back at the end of an age and destroys it by fire, and then restarts the age out of the ashes, and it incarnates at that period into an individual. So incarnation is different than what Jesus does. We shouldn't be mixing polytheism in with what the Holy Spirit does, creates the soul and the body within Mary. So you have the spirit of the Word become flesh. So it's partly human and partly God, but without sex. An avatara shares an oikotarian with an individual like Buddha and gives it wisdom or additional powers, just as Satan did with Judas to have the courage to carry through, and seemingly will do with Antichrist in the end time. And so when we look at the things that Lewis wrote about, he was writing polytheism in an adept way that is otherwise unaccountable for, and that he never renounced those writings, ever. That's on record. I've searched, I've never found him to say, hey, what I wrote about was polytheist, now I'm a Christian, don't follow it. Now, from a polytheist perspective, and how easily and how gullible we can be as sheep, right? And we need to be able to recognize the wolves. Gnostics have a sect called Gnostic Christians who believe in Jesus, but not as deity status, but as a teacher and a prophet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So they can call themselves Christians. They just don't say, quote unquote, Gnostic Christians, and not be 100% lying. It's the double entendres. It's the double speak. It's the allegory in how they speak so that they can do things in plain sight. But if you're Christian, at some point in time, you have to realize what I'm writing about is polytheist history, polytheist religions, and characters and places and locations that are important in polytheist history. And that's what mythopoetic is. In fact, Tolkien and Lewis create a eucatastrophe. Eucatastrophe is a compounded, made-up word, so to speak, that they created, that they will say EU in Greek means new and catastrophe means turn. Catastrophe is a flood word derivative coming out of Greek for that cataclysm. EU is the first two words for humorism that was a methodology of hermeneutics, with the etymology back to Hermes, that was used to decipher the history out of the fable or the mythos, as in the great classics of Greek history. Mythopoetic is that same style as the classics or the Roman classics. It's all the same art. This is just a modern sort of version of it. Eucatastrophe is what is used in their writings to save the hero from a terrible ending. So you have a happy ever after fairy tale ending. Freemasons, Gnostics, polytheists look at the Bible as a quote unquote, and Tolkien and Lewis were on record as saying this several times, as a fairy tale. And that the Jesus by implication, crucifixion is a eucatastrophe. It's not the full truth. It's to save the reader from suffering through the tragedy of the hero. So that in their belief system as a Gnostic Christian, Jesus was taken down from the cross by Joseph of Arimathea, healed back together, married Mary Magdalene, and started a bloodline.
What? This is very different.
Yes, this, and what I was quoting in these terms, like fairy tale and eucatastrophe and these other terms, these are their terms. They are talking in a language in plain sight we don't understand. And if you were Christian, you probably wouldn't do that. Or if you became Christian, you would say, I'm renouncing my past life and I'm going to come clean here and tell you, yes, these are terrific stories, but they're polytheistic. He never said that. Neither did Tolkien. So people will end up believing what they want to believe. All I do is I provide information that I can't sort out unless I rearrange it in a way that does make some sense, that says they look like Gnostic moles to me.
Can I ask something? I want to ask something around C.S. Lewis's book, The Screw Tape Letters. What is your thesis for why Lewis would have even read that book? Like, I've heard so many Christians have said they've read Screw Tape Letters and it's like changed their walk completely with God. So what do you think Lewis's like intent would have been, or maybe his motive would have been in writing that book?
Well, we don't know what God he was talking about and what audience he was writing it for. So understand that each of the people of the bloodlines and genealogies have a source, patriarchal or matriarchal God or fallen angel. When you have the royals taking their crowning ceremony and doing oaths, they're swearing an oath to what we think is God. They are not. They received their divine right to rule from the Baalim Council, as we understand that biblically. And this is an ancient right that goes right back to the beginning of the flood and before the flood. They have authority given to them to rule over the realm that's been given to them through the inheritance expressed through this ritual that was given to them through the God that rules that nation, not the God of the Bible. They are experts at double entendres and hiding things in plain sight. Now, does that lead people back to God? If it does that, that would be a good thing. Or are these Gnostic moles participating in the deception to get more people to read it and to hear more things and to learn more about C.S. Lewis and get further away from God? I don't know. I don't know what people would believe, but and can God use some things for good? He does. So there's that possibility as well, but be very careful with what we teach our children. And if we are going to have them watch the Narnia tales or read it or Lord of the Rings or other polytheists, explain and walk through with your children what these beings are and the history that they're talking about. Put it into a biblical context.
Right.
I watch entertainment, all the time, but I know what they're doing, that they're putting in there that is completely polytheist, which is what they do because they control all the entertainment. They always have as part of the top two classes.
Yep. That's great advice. You good on that?
Mm-hmm. That's great.
So all this stuff is fascinating and entertaining.
Yeah.
It's easy though to get down this rabbit hole and not be able to get out. So can you pull people back out of the rabbit hole and kind of reorient us around Jesus? Because I think that's actually the solution to everything. You've studied as much about Jesus as you have ancient history. I don't think that you've lost yourself to the pursuit of knowledge. I think that you've learned everything that you've learned so that you can validate that Jesus is who he said he was and that there is one God. And you're very clear about that. But maybe for the people listening to this and they're just like, well, what do I even do with this? Yep. Can you pull us back out of the rabbit hole and center us?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is that we don't understand the ways of God in Jesus. We can try, but we fall short. So we have to have faith in them, that what has gone on, what is going on, and what will go on, he's in full control over and he's greater than free choice. He lets it play out so that the names of the book of life will all have that opportunity. And it's that gift that Christ offers us, that God offers through the atonement and sacrifice of Jesus. Life is a gift, and an opportunity to choose God. And that we are the resolution to that angelic rebellion to put an end to all of this that goes on caused by the angelic rebellion so that we can move on into eternity. So we have to have faith in Jesus, number one, that this is all happening for the good cause, and that we're here for a short time compared to what is being offered. And we don't have to accept that gift. We're free to choose or not, but we do need to choose. But how you get comforted with that, of what has to take place and what must take place, is that we're here to learn why we're here, even though the wisdom of the world is doing everything they can to not let us see it and to wedge faith issues. We have everything we need in the Bible to understand why we're here, if we're prepared to learn that, and then if we're prepared to accept that, and that we will find a sense of peace in that we are then truly providing the testimony of Jesus, and hopefully that others will hear what we're saying, come back to Jesus, and bring more into eternity with us. This is part of that sifting. Our lack of knowledge is exactly opposite to what angels had to in terms of God and intimacy with immortality already given. And so how you come to terms with it is that you don't have to say, I want to be part of the fig tree generation. You don't have to say, I want to go through the last 7 years or any part of the last 7 years or any of the sorrows before the last 7 years. But you need to understand that testimony is why we're created, because we have faith, which is our way into eternity, and it's manifested in our testimony. Somehow, some way. It may not be as great as what Paul did or Peter or some of the prophets, but we have all a role. So have comfort that what you're doing by having faith in Jesus and then testifying is you're doing what you were created to do.
Yeah.
You don't have control when you die. You don't have control over events. You have control over what you do. But the world will do everything it can, the wisdom of the world, to prevent us from seeing clearly. And they've done a terrific job of deceiving us. They control everything with our entertainment, history, imagery, so much so it's so hard to tell what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's evil, who's on our side, who isn't on our side. And so that's how you come to grips with it, is that you're not told you will not go through tribulation. We are told clearly several times in the New Testament, we will go through tribulation. And so we should be prepared that tribulation isn't given to us by God. Tribulation is given to us by those who control this world. It's contrived tribulation by those who rule this world. God doesn't bring tribulation. God brings wrath to those who bring tribulation upon us and to the ungodly. There's this distinct difference between wrath and tribulation. But we should not think we are so privileged somehow to say that that we will not have to go through some kind of tribulation. People will say, well, Jesus would never be a wife beater, as in the church being part of the bride. So there's no way you could have tribulation. Well, that didn't hold true for the early Christians. And they say, well, that's just for them. But I don't know how you distinguish when you're a wife beater and when you're not with that horrible analogy.
Yeah, he's the one that's doing it, which is weird.
Yeah, it doesn't stand the sense of logic. And I would put this to Christians is that, and we're not in the last 7 years yet, but we might be in the fig tree generation, and I think we are. There's tribulation going on with Christians throughout the world. Mm-hmm. Don't tell me people in China are not going through tribulation. They are. People in India, Pakistan, Nigeria, Middle East. To be so arrogant to say that we are so special, we won't go through tribulation because we're going to be saved from that, and refuse to acknowledge what's going on in the world today makes no sense. Does that mean that Chinese Christians aren't Christian? Who are we to say that? Right. How do you get to that level to say those kinds of things? But we have been taught by the wisdom of the world to believe in our own biases, what we would like to happen versus what the Bible says will happen. So our comfort is to blow that wisdom of the world away, blow that haze away, and understand we're here to worship God, and we're here to help others along their way as well.
Amazing. Any final questions? We'll pray and wrap up. You go
no
with
final
that?
Questions. I agree with everything Gary said. Truly.
He agrees with everything you said.
Yeah, that was a long rant I did. So
no, just there what he was saying. I was just wanting to affirm what he was saying of like.
Jake said, "I agree with everything you said in that episode."
Dude, that would not. I can't even say that. I don't understand it enough to even say that I agree or disagree with it. I have to.
I agree. I agree with you. All right, let's pray. Then we'll wrap up. God, thank you for Gary Wayne. Thank you for giving him the mind that you have given him. Thank you for sharing your wisdom through Gary with us and other people. And we just want to, after an episode like this, we just want to kind of reaffirm our stance. We don't want to get lost in anything that isn't you. It's a good thing to have understanding, and we thank you for it. It's a gift. We can ask for wisdom and receive it. It's a good thing to have knowledge. It's a good thing to understand your viewpoint on things, but we don't want to get lost in anything that isn't you. And when you bless us, it is a privilege. When we suffer for you, it is a privilege. And I pray that you would protect people's minds from any chaos or confusion that they might get lost in trying to figure it all out. There are going to be questions. There are going to be questions that we don't have answers for, maybe forever until we get to heaven. But we choose to trust you even with our unanswered questions. We thank you for just your ability to guide us, not as just an all-powerful being, God, but as a father and as someone who desires relationship with us. We can trust you. And I thank you for this man who has given us empirical proof that we can trust you, that you have it figured out from the beginning to the end. And we move forward and we trust you with the things that we don't know and the things that we do know. And we thank you for the gift of wisdom and the gift of peace. And we ask for both of them for everyone listening to this. And we love you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Love you guys.